Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job.
Hello and welcome back to Homeschool Together. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have a chance and you'd like to support the podcast, we have a link down below where you can click on that and support the podcast. But always the best way to support the podcast is to tell a friend and a family, and especially podcasts like this where we talk about our homeschooling journeys, where we talk with a family who is, young at homeschooling. They talk about nakedly about all the challenges and the tribulations and all
and
the
joys.
And the joys. And really we get to kind of pull back the curtain and see what the life is like inside of a homeschooling family. And we have dozens and dozens of these interviews. And today was another great interview with David Clover and their little daughter. And it was an absolutely fantastic interview.
Yeah. So David is a homeschooling dad. And one of the things that was really interesting about our interview with him was that this is a family that uses a secularized Waldorf-inspired curriculum.
And we go into depth about how he, modified the curriculum.
Right. This was very interesting. We haven't talked with a family that used that before, so that was a really interesting point. And then the other interesting piece of this is that David decided that he wanted to send his daughter back to school. And so there's still going to be a portion of her education that will happen at home, but they're actually trying out school for her this year. And I think it's a really great opportunity to talk to a family who's kind of done both and is now running on a little bit of a hybrid model, and knowing that for so many homeschool families, homeschooling might be a season of your lives, but it might not be everything. And maybe at some point you're going to go back to school for a time, or you're going to use school and then homeschool during the summers, or maybe you're just going to homeschool through elementary and then eventually send your kids back to school. The idea that kind of we're going to do an all or nothing is, I don't think, very realistic or very generous to the fact that we as parents are trying to do the best thing for our kids in whichever stage they're at and whichever season of our lives we're in. And, each year might look different. So I think it's a great perspective that doesn't often get talked about on homeschooling podcasts, definitely is, where does maybe school is sometimes the right answer for different families. So this was a great interview, and we so appreciated David's time in talking with us about his family. So without further ado, let's get to David and hear his story. Hi, David. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It is so nice to meet you both.
I know we have seen your name pop up on the Facebook group, and so we're excited to talk with you and dig into some homeschool stuff. So give us some background. Tell us about your family and what drove you all to homeschool.
Yeah, so my partner, Chet, and I have one kiddo, a daughter. She is 8 now. We were really reluctant to homeschool. We definitely didn't plan on it from the beginning. I know a lot of people do. For me, we decided to just have one child. And I was like, well, obviously she'll be in school because that's where other kids are. And then also I'm an artist, a fine artist originally. And I grew up my whole life being told, oh, well, you can teach art. Like as if being a teacher was like the only responsible choice in that field that I could do. And so I think I really developed a distaste for the idea of teaching at a pretty young age because everyone was telling me like, oh, obviously you'll be a teacher. And I was like, I don't think that I want to do that. I was also a really awkward kid. I'm autistic and I was not diagnosed as a child. So I didn't know why I was so awkward and uncomfortable around other kids. So I was like, I didn't even like kids as a kid. Like, I'll like my own kid, but I'm not gonna like teaching. That's crazy. So it wasn't really on my radar as an option. But then what happened? the first thing that happened is when she was 4, we applied to 2 different preschools and we didn't get into either of them.
Yeah.
And um, I wasn't really happy with the other options in our area. So I was like, well, we have neighbors who homeschool. And honestly, like, I was like, we don't really need to do preschool. But I was like, well, we'll do some homeschool preschool things just to kind of satisfy you because you were excited about starting preschool.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we had neighbors who were homeschooling. So that seemed logical to her. She was like, oh, okay, I'm doing school at home just like these people do. And it was terrible. And we both really, really hated it. I was trying to do all these Montessori inspired things, and I was also working from home at the same time. And she wanted all of my attention, and she was upset, and everything was kind of a mess. And then that year, so her preschool year in March is when COVID hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of health problems and I'm pretty high risk for COVID complications. So we had to be really, really careful. And everything, we just stopped doing any quote unquote school stuff. And I was at that time, more certain than ever, no matter what happens, she's going to kindergarten in September.
September, yeah.
I will not allow any other thing to happen. And of course, you guys remember, it's so weird now that those first couple weeks of COVID, when everyone was like, oh yeah, 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks off, and it seemed
Oh,
like
this
it
is
was
kind
going
of
to
cool. I
be,
could be home from work a little bit.
yeah, a
I
month or
mean,
so. Excuse me, I gotta take a
unfortunately, there
drink
was
of
a lot
water.
of death involved, but it was a horrible thing. But it was like, oh, some more time with my family for a little bit, and then it just
Right. For those of us that
going.
lived, it
Yeah.
had
It
some,
kept going and going.
yeah, yeah. And so it was getting close to summer. And of course, the plans for what schools were going to reopen in the fall
Mhm.
or how they were going to do it was all still up in the air. We had no idea what they were going to do yet. The local school district hadn't even released like an outline of a plan yet.
Mhm.
And we live in an area where we're in Michigan, we have school of choice, and we have a lot of public schools and charter schools in our city, but you have to apply for all of them. None of them are just automatic entry. So
Mm.
it's like you have to decide and you have to put in all these applications. Now, the public schools, you do one application, but at that time, it was still, you might be putting in 5 applications. And we forgot to send in some of the applications because it was so stressful. And then come June, we were like, well, this isn't going away. And so then, yeah, so we were like, okay, so what's the school plan going to be in the fall? And in person was out because of my health risks at that time. We barely knew which masks worked, and there was no vaccine on the horizon or treatments, right? There was no like known treatments yet. And then also, she was afraid of Zoom calls.
Mm.
She wouldn't even do a video call with my mom. She would hide under the table.
Oh.
So we were like, she can't do Zoom kindergarten. I'm not sure anyone should do Zoom kindergarten, but she can't do
Ours
Zoom kindergarten.
tried to do Zoom dance class.
Dance
It
class.
did not work.
It did not work well.
Yeah, she's now done a couple of like one-off classes like that on Outschool, and some of them have been okay, but it's not, it's not socializing. So I was talking actually with my therapist at the time, and I was stressing about all of it, and they said to me, you have to stop looking for the best option and figure out which is the least bad option. Like you just have to admit that all the options are bad right now.
Right.
And so I made a
Such
list
a
and I
bad
was like, I
time.
guess homeschooling is the least bad option. So we bought a curriculum based on a recommendation from a friend. Just asked one friend to keep it simple. What do you think we should do? We're just gonna do kindergarten. There's no way we're gonna do more than kindergarten. We bought the all-in-one curriculum. We thought we were gonna, just muddle through. Figured if we screw it up completely, hey, it's only 1 year. How behind could you get? And then my daughter and I ended up really loving it. And we really kind of fell in love. And I kind of fell in love with educating and with learning about the way that kids learn and the way that she learns and the way that I learn. And that all became really exciting for me and kind of like little bit of special interest energy.
That's awesome.
Do you think it
So
was the difference in the curriculums that changed your outlook, or
Yeah.
was it the kind of accepting of, we're just going to make the best out of a bad situation? Or, what do you think was like the change factor between preschool and kinder?
Yeah.
that's a really good question. I think it was partly the acceptance. I think when I was trying to do preschool, I was trying to do a lot of other things at the same time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also I wasn't listening to my kid. I
Mhm.
think different learning styles do work different for different people. People like different things. That's not a surprise. And I really had this ideological bent towards this like very self-directed learning. So we'd have our little Montessori trays and she would, get to pick what she worked with.
Mhm.
And she hated it.
Oh,
And
really?
she eventually, she came to me and she said, Papa, I just want you to teach me stuff. And I was like, oh, well, how do I do that?
That wasn't my plan.
That wasn't
Yeah,
my
that
plan.
wasn't my plan
You're
ever.
supposed to find your path in the world. You want me to
Right, I
tell
know.
you?
Like, aren't you excited by these unique manipulatives? And she was like,
Intrinsically motivated to do
Oh,
that
yeah.
puzzle.
And she was
That
like, can you,
I want a lecture. Come on.
yeah, really? Yeah. So she really, kind of wanted this more top-down approach to
And
learning.
and that's the amazing thing is that there's so many different. There's no one size fits all, and it's some kids would
Right,
respond well to that, and some
Mhm.
kids would want the more Montessori. We know our
right.
youngest would want the more Montessori, but I think our oldest is now starting to like the just read to me and teach me stuff,
Yeah,
and I want
she
to learn.
wants a lot of that attention, hands-on
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's funny how each kid is a little bit different and how different learning styles and different, school options fit
Hmm.
better for different kids. So it's funny how
Hmm.
you had to
So
discover that.
how did you adapt to that change, right? Because that wasn't I love when we like buy all the manipulatives, we have this whole plan, and then our kids are like,
Gosh.
no, that's not going to work for us. And so we have to really adapt and change. What was that process like for you to like get your brain to kind of switch gears?
Yeah, I think so kindergarten was really, we bought the Oak Meadow kindergarten curriculum,
Hmm.
and it's kind of all packaged in one. So there's like a storybook and then there's the lessons book, and you decide what you're going to do which days, but it's all there for you.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So it was very clear, like, I'm going to read you this story and then we are going to do this activity together. And she really loved that. And she also really loves, she would hate that I said this, but she really loves authority. So the
Mhm.
fact that I was like, the book says to do this, she was like, oh, okay, the book says, let's go. That was very
That's
comforting to
funny.
her to have like a higher, it's not just the papa says this is a good idea. So, so yeah, I think it was really doing that process. And then through doing that process in kindergarten, because we started with one curriculum. We're just going to do this one thing for the year. And then by January, I'm like taking pieces out, I'm adding stuff, I'm changing things. We're going to do this in a different order. That's not working for me.
Yes.
Um,
But
yeah, right.
were you doing that changing and that adapting because of what she needed, as opposed to like we're gonna play and test? Is you were starting to say, I see what she needs, and I'm starting to
Or
build.
what you want to do, maybe, because sometimes
Yeah,
I'm
I
thinking
think
like
Okay,
both.
okay.
she'd like this, but I also think this would be awesome.
It's kind of funny, like as we interview a lot of different families, we find that we all start somewhere, and then everyone becomes this eclectic homeschooler
Yeah.
because they start to
Absolutely.
realize what their kids need and what works best for them and what interest they may have. And it's hard to find a one size fits all curriculum that solves that problem. You really have to mash together multiple things.
Yeah.
But starting somewhere was obviously the right place.
Yeah, I feel like it like helped teach me how to teach.
Exactly.
And
Yes. I
then
ran into the same thing. I
yeah,
had to learn to
yeah,
be a teacher.
Right.
You don't know what to do.
right. You don't know. Like that. And it's funny, I was just looking back on something that I wrote from that fall, and I was just so exhausted. I was like, oh my gosh, we're doing 2 lessons a day. And one of the lessons is just like playing together because it's
Mhm.
kindergarten.
Yeah.
And I'm so tired. I'm the tiredest I've ever been in my life.
We're
How is
bringing
this
back nap time.
real?
We're bringing back nap time.
And that's how I was when I first. The reason that it was funny to me is because she just started at a local school this fall, and we're still
Yeah.
kind of deciding how that's gonna play out for our family. But I had the same reaction to putting her in school. I'm just like, I'm so tired. I drop
Mhm.
her off and pick her up, and it's the most exhausting, not exciting. It's the most exhausting thing I've ever done in my life. How is this real? So yeah, I think that changed. But yeah, I think there were two things. One was realizing what she needed more, and the other was coming to the realization that, like, if you think back to your best teachers when you were in school, they were the teachers that were excited about the subject matter.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
realizing, like, oh, I can teach things I'm excited about, or I can
Mhm.
teach in a way that's fun for me, and then that's going to show through, right? Like that's going to
Mhm.
shine through, and that's going to work for her better than me trying to push myself through a curriculum that I hate, but she said she wanted, which we did try once, and that was never again.
Yeah.
So what was it about Oak Meadow that you really connected with? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because we haven't talked to an Oak Meadow family before, so
Yeah.
we're really
So we're
interested to hear.
not an Oak Meadow family anymore. We only did the kindergarten year. I liked that it was a bit slower than a lot of the other kindergarten curriculums. It actually reminded me a bit more of the way that kindergarten was when I was a kid, like not pushing reading in kindergarten necessarily, but like
Mhm.
let's learn the letters. I liked the hands-on aspect. I liked there was a lot of movement, and I liked the heavy arts focus. I'm an artist, so that's not shocking.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really liked those. And I liked in Waldorf education, most things are taught initially through story. So you read or tell a story first, and then you kind of let that soak in, and then you like pull out the academic info from it and sort of do something with it.
Mhm.
That's paraphrasing, but
Mhm.
more or less. And I really liked that aspect of it as well. But Oak Meadow itself, I don't think it's not something I continued to use, partly because it's an all-in-one. And like you said, like that doesn't work for most people. They have different needs in different areas. The
Mhm.
math was too slow for her. So that was the first thing that we added, is that she was bored of the math and really excited about numbers and wanted to do more math than they were giving her. So we were like,
Mhm.
okay, well, Papa will find more math and we will do more math. And then she wanted to start learning how to read, and they were just teaching the letters.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, well, what do we do with that? I kind of remember doing a little bit of phonics when I was a kid. Can I just kind of do what I remember with you? Nope, nope, that doesn't work. Wow, that was bad. And and then I think it was by the spring of that year, we realized that we liked homeschooling and wanted to keep doing it. And I'm dyslexic,
Mhm.
Mhm.
which means my daughter is almost definitely dyslexic.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I was like, I have to learn how to teach her how to read, and I don't understand it still as an adult. So I'm a nerd. So I started doing a lot of research. And then my partner was so sick of me for about 2 months. Every time we talked, I was like, did you know this new phonics thing I just learned? It's so exciting. Did you know
Did you know? Did you
this? This comes from the French. And they
know?
were just like, oh my God, stop it. Um, they were very nice, but it was a little bit it grated on them. So I got really excited about the science of reading and phonics, and we started adding logic of English
Mhm.
in the
How
spring.
did you like Logic of English?
Oh, we really liked it. We
Okay.
really liked the first two books of it, and after that, I think it got a little bit too complicated, and we had to change a lot of things to make it work.
Okay.
It's interesting. I remember listening to one of your podcasts where you said that Logic of English looked too complicated
Yeah.
versus All About Reading.
Yeah.
And I looked at both of them and felt the opposite. I was like, okay, this I can
Interesting.
handle. That
Yeah,
one
okay.
looks, that's too many moving parts. I can't do it.
They're all about reading has a lot of moving
It
parts.
does. I think we watched just the
Yeah.
very first video of like doodling dragons or whatever in Logic of English with like the 4 sounds of A, and I was like, all right, we're moving too quick.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. See,
Well,
I
'cause
really
we knew
liked,
we knew our
yeah,
learner would have struggled with that. It
but
would have
all
been
the
Right.
songs I think really could like totally click with a lot of kids, and maybe they would have clicked with our learner and just didn't click with me. I think that's the funny thing about curriculum, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of like you have to have this perfect, not it isn't perfect, but a good matching between what you can do and understand and what your kid needs and wants. And
Absolutely.
sometimes, like you said, you pick one that one really loves and the other one doesn't. It's not going to work, so
Yeah.
sometimes it's the best kind of both worlds you have to try to find, which is why I think we all end up going eclectic at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are no non-eclectic homeschoolers. I'm convinced of it. Or there are 3, and
Right. I think
they're
that
doing
some of
their
the
own thing over there.
non-eclectic ones tend to be ones that have very large families where they're like, I don't physically have the time or
Right.
energy to like do anything custom because I'm homeschooling 4 kids or 5 kids. It's like
that's a good point.
we need to
Yeah.
buy things that all work. And so I think that's a totally valid way. But for us who have, 1 or 2 kids, maybe even 3, I think we just kind of start dabbling because
Yeah.
we can't help ourselves.
What did you do for math? You said that the math was moving too slow. What did you find a curriculum, or did you
Oh
just,
my gosh.
yeah, what was
You
that
guys want to
struggle
talk
with?
about math? I have
I
math notes.
Yeah, no,
Oh
let's talk
yeah,
about
let's
math.
get into it.
Yeah.
Let me get my
So
water. All right, let's talk about math.
yeah. Okay. So we have actually had a lot of interesting math adventures. So we
Cool.
started using wild math.
Okay.
We're like, we can add
I've
this,
heard about
and
that.
it seemed like in spirit. It's a lot of outdoor activities. She likes to be outside. She's really active, and again, it appealed to me. She hated it. It didn't work. It was terrible. She
I know a
was
lot of people that
so,
love it though too, so it's kind of
oh,
funny,
absolutely.
right?
It's
Like it
great.
just
And
hits differently.
I have the author's like book on my bookshelf. I love her. She's great. But she, my daughter, not the author of All About Wild Math, my daughter, she had like absorbed this idea that when she was outside, she had free time.
Oh, okay.
So when we started being like, okay, we're outside, so we're just going to do 10 minutes of writing numbers in chalk, she was like, absolutely not.
This is my time.
This is me down
No
here.
way. School
Yeah.
happens inside. Yeah, so she was not having it. She might actually like it more now, which is interesting because they change so much as they grow.
That's the other hard part.
Yeah, so we started adding that to the Oak Meadow, and then I started making kind of my own math lessons to try to fit the style of what she had done, but teach her things that they hadn't covered yet. But that was sort of confusing. And then we tried Math Mammoth, which was too much for her. It was too much writing.
Mhm.
And then yeah, that's what actually, the math is actually what pulled me into studying Waldorf in more detail, and then actually creating my own sort of Waldorf inspired but secularized, like taking it apart and building something else out of it.
Okay.
Because the Oak Meadow was Waldorf inspired, but it's really its own thing.
Okay.
And it is a secular curriculum, but most people, when they talk about secular Waldorf inspired curriculums, what they mean is we took Waldorf and we pulled out the overtly religious material, and there's still underlying religious influences, which get kind of weird once you actually poke at them. Unless you're into it, in which case, fine. But I'm not. So yeah, that fall. So it was like once we started first grade, she started saying that she hated math. And she had previously been this really math loving kid who the math wasn't moving fast enough for her and it wasn't advanced enough for her. And I was like, okay, we got to do something else. We got to go back to, when did you like math? Well, you liked math when we were doing the Waldorf math in Oak Meadow. So
Mhm.
I guess I'm going to learn how to do Waldorf math now. I ended up joining like subscription community group to learn about Waldorf education. I bought a stupid amount of Waldorf math books and started, I'm a nerd. So I was
Sure.
just like, okay, we're just going to go in, we're going to learn all about this and take it apart and then build something that actually works. And it worked. It was so much work. It
It's a
was
lot of work.
an incredible amount of like work on the back end for
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
But it was really fun and really rewarding and really clicked with her in a way that other things weren't. And
And I'm sure that fed you because you saw it working.
yeah,
That like I feel like I can do more, and I feel like I can continue this effort because it feels validating because it's working on the back on the front end. It's okay if I take
absolutely.
a little bit more work on our end. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was
Yeah.
like I'm staying up late writing my math curriculum stories and then
Yep.
waking up to teach them.
Yeah.
Um, and the first Waldorf block that I did with her, I didn't tell her that I made it.
Hmm.
Mm.
I actually like printed it off to make it look like something that I found online so that she would actually trust me. Because if I said like I'm trying something new, I made it myself, she was going to be like, absolutely not, you crazy man. So so I just, and then I think it was like 6 months later, I told her, I was like, I actually wrote all those stories, and she was really impressed. So I was
That's
like,
awesome.
Oh, that's cool.
so that really got me into like taking the Waldorf stuff apart and
Okay.
secularizing it, which I know was one of the questions you guys had if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm really curious. So, give us kind of the overview of what it is about Waldorf that you really like, and that kind of, how is it different from other teaching styles and like really appealed to your family?
Yeah. I don't think we
Yeah.
haven't covered it on the podcast very much.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So Waldorf is weird. It's really weird.
Okay.
It's very sort of self-contained. So the things that I liked about Waldorf initially is I liked that in the earlier years it was moving a little bit slower than a lot of other curriculums and resources that I saw. It's the same stuff that I liked about Oak Meadow, right? Which has that Waldorf influence. I like the art focus. I liked that there was a lot of emphasis on time outside. And we have a lot of neighbors who send their kids to our local Waldorf school, and all those kids seemed happy and well adjusted.
Okay.
So it was
Proof
like,
in, proof in
okay,
the pudding. Okay.
yep, it's a little weird, but the proof's in the pudding. These kids seem, they seem happy, they seem smart, they seem well adjusted.
Yeah.
They don't seem miserable, whatever. So, there was that. So we actually one of the schools that we had applied for preschool was our local Waldorf school. And when we did the tour there, the really nice woman who was giving the tour, she walked us around all the classrooms. They're all really pretty, but in this like weird specific way.
Okay.
And then she said, she's going to give us a talk about the origins of Waldorf. And she said, Waldorf education was created by Rudolf Steiner, this man who was a scientist who later became a philosopher. And through becoming a philosopher, he discovered, the correct, best way to educate children. I see you smiling, Matt.
No, no, there's a lot of people who have those grand ideas.
And I was
Yes.
like, that's a very interesting story. And it sounds like
This doesn't pass the
nonsense.
Wikipedia test.
No, it doesn't pass the sniff test. Like,
Right.
so I was
Everybody
like,
thinks they know the best way.
right. And even so, I was like, scientist who became a philosopher, like, that's vague. What kind of scientist was he? Like, um, yeah, so I started doing research into it, and it was so funny. My partner was like, I like this school. What did you think? And I was like, that story was weird. I'm going to go do research. Um, so I don't want to upset any more Waldorf parents that might be listening, but I would think that the more accurate version of the story is that Rudolf Steiner was kind of an academic who like edited some scientific papers.
Mhm.
And he then became an occultist and
Fun
studied
fact.
under Madame Blavatsky
It
in
was,
the
but that
Theosophical
was,
Society.
but that was very hot those days.
Oh, it absolutely was.
It was the
Yes,
thing.
It was in
yes.
vogue.
It was a very vogue
I'm
thing
not
those days.
complaining. And then he had some clairvoyant experiences
Mm.
and believed. There are people who think that he was just kind of a charlatan, but I assume he really believed that. So he had these clairvoyant experiences, which he believed gave him access to the Akashic records, which of course are the magical space tablets that have all of the things that have ever happened or will ever happen written on them. So since he had access to all of those, he knew everything, including how best to educate children, but also how best to run a farm,
It always ends.
medicine,
Yeah,
Yeah.
a
it was
lot
very
of,
specific. Of all
yeah,
the things that could come off of the space tablets, I feel like
But
how to educate kids, that is the most.
he also talked
yeah.
about owning ducks named Mildred.
Yeah, so he did actually, I think education wasn't his primary interest. That's just what has like
So
kind
out
of
of this
stayed popular of
weirdness,
his thoughts.
like out of all of this kind of crazy, he
Yeah,
actually, like, even a broken clock is right, twice a day, right? So he just
yeah,
but there was some really good stuff that came out of this kind of wacky story.
yeah, I think
Eh,
so. So I think what probably happened is he had, he had all of these ideas about human development. And then a buddy of his who owned a cigarette factory was like, hey, bro, you want to start a school? And we can use your ideas about how children develop to run the school. And he starts the school. But when you say he starts the school, what we mean really is he gave 2 weeks of lectures to the teachers who were starting the school and gave them kind of some very high level instruction.
Wow.
And that they were also already versed in his ideas about child development, which again were based on his clairvoyant experiences and a lot of like very spiritualist ideas about how humans work. So, that, and some of it was also probably just his opinions, right? Like, so there's a lot of stuff in there that was like, this was in Austria. So it was his responses to the things that he didn't like about the
mm,
current Austrian school system. So, like, he
Mhm.
didn't like that kids had to listen to long lectures. So, he wanted them to learn through stories. So
Mm.
that's, yeah. So that, like you said, I often think about it as a broken clock of that,
Mhm.
like these, there were these good ideas mixed in with these totally weird ideas. Like you're not supposed to teach them the alphabet formally until age 7
Okay.
because from birth to age 7, they're still developing their physical body. There are 4 different bodies. I can't remember all of their names.
wow.
Wow.
But only one of them is the physical body, and then the other 3 are like spiritual or intellectual or
Okay.
whatever.
All right.
And so
Interesting.
you're not supposed to teach them the alphabet until around age 7 because their physical body is still developing. And if you divert spiritual energy from their physical body to teach them the alphabet, then their organs will be malformed.
Got it.
Well,
Got it.
okay.
But
Which
Yeah.
it's kind of funny
that's
because
super easily
yeah,
testable, right?
Yeah,
but
Like,
right.
they're talking about delaying reading now to like 7 or 8 years old. So
yeah,
it's kind of weird
So
that
it's like he had
right.
weird
it was an accident.
origins
It was an
for that.
accident.
But so do you think that really Waldorf education didn't come from this guy, but came from these teachers who
Yes.
started the school, who had all
Yes.
this educational background and were like, maybe if we delayed reading, boy, they saw other benefits and went, oh yeah. But
Yes.
it wasn't because of that. It was because of
Yeah, there may be some
That's
people
very
like
much
that.
what I
child
think.
development and stuff. So really it
I
was
think
these
it's
unsung
been
heroes of these
created.
teachers.
Absolutely. I mean, especially those first teachers, like they had almost nothing to go on and they were making it up as they went along. And then all the
Yeah.
teachers since then, because one of the things about Waldorf schools and Waldorf education, as Steiner imagined it, is that they wouldn't give the teachers a curriculum.
Mm.
they would say like the child is the curriculum. So the teachers, even in a school setting, are having to customize the curriculum to the kids in front of them every single year. And
Okay.
also in most Waldorf schools, the same teacher follows the children through the grades.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of a neat concept. So,
Yeah.
unless you have a teacher you don't like, in which
I was gonna
case it's not a
say
neat
it'd
concept.
be
Yeah,
yeah.
right. But when it works, it really works, right? Because so you start first grade with the same teacher that you would have through eighth grade.
Hmm.
And so each summer, the teacher is studying up on the material for the next year and then thinking about the kids that they're working with. And
That's cool.
so, like, of course that works, right? Like, of
Right.
course, it's the same thing that we do when we're homeschooling, right? When we give
Hmm.
kids individual attention and
Hmm.
learn with them, cool things happen
Hmm.
Yeah.
versus like
So,
rotely, like if you only teach third grade, you're just like, well, this is what third grade is. And you just keep doing third grade every year.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think a lot of the cool things that come out of it come from, the 3, 4 generations of Waldorf teachers that we now have who maybe would hate me and believe a lot of Steiner's ideas and think that I'm horrible for divorcing them from what they do. But, they're doing really cool things with it a lot
Yeah.
of the
do you,
time.
do you think in general for a homeschool family like Waldorf would be it's a gentler approach, not quite as rigorous in an academic sit down focus kind of way?
So I think it's a gentler approach in the first few years and then it ramps up. And I think for some kids, it ramps up too fast,
Okay.
right? Like just like anything, there's going to be variation. But I do think it is a slower, gentler introduction to a lot of academic concepts. And some kids benefit from that.
Right.
Interesting.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. So
So, yeah, could you like walk us through a day? Like, what is a day for a secularized, eclectic
Yeah.
Waldorf inspired,
yeah.
homeschool? What does that look like for you guys, and
Yeah. Great.
help other families, see what
Absolutely.
that looks?
So I'm going to go from kind of what we were doing for second grade.
Okay.
So we would wake up in the morning whenever we wake up, the best part of homeschooling. And then
Right.
we would have breakfast and do our morning chores. We have ducks, so they have to be
Yes.
fed in the morning. All the stuff has to be done. And then my daughter would usually get dressed and ready with my partner while I
Hmm.
kind of got myself ready and did a little bit of, looking over my notes to make sure I know what I'm going into.
Yep.
And then we would always start our day with something physical, some kind of physical activity.
Hmm.
That's one thing that I like about Waldorf is that they typically um, do like a circle time or some kind of physical activity to kind of introduce you to the day. Again, there are spiritual reasons for that. We don't apply those. We just are like, hey, we need to get our wiggles out.
Yep.
So when
Right.
she was younger, we would do like, dances with moves
Hmm.
or whatever. And then when she got a little bit older and thought that was too cheesy, we would just go for a long walk.
Okay.
So we do our walk, we come back, and then we read or tell a story related to whatever our current block is. Blocks are my favorite thing about Waldorf. So you have one focus for typically around a month, but it can be more or less. So you're really zooming in on that topic every day for about a month. So rather than trying to do science, social studies, and language arts all in one day or even all in one week, we're really zooming in kind of intensely in our one subject. So, like, if we were doing our earth science block, we would read something about earth science, and then we would do something hands on with that information, which would vary depending on what we were doing. Sometimes it would be a craft, lots of times it would be a craft or a drawing or a painting. Or if it's a science block, maybe we're doing experiments. We love
Hmm.
experiments. And then sometimes some writing. That's another thing that I liked about it is that it was really easy to integrate writing into all of the topics.
Mhm.
The Waldorf education doesn't give a lot of guidance as to how to do that, but I really love the book, The Writing Revolution. I don't know if you guys have come across that.
Nope, not yet. I'll have to
Um,
look it up.
Well, we'll put it in the show
oh,
notes for
yeah.
others.
It's really, really great. And it talks about doing writing instruction at the sentence level early
Okay.
and kind of teaching writing through all your other subjects.
Neat.
Because, of course, you can write about science, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes it more interesting for the kids, I think. So we would do that. And then she would have free time until lunch, however long that was. And then we'd have our lunch. After lunch, we would do our like non Waldorf stuff. So that's when we would do our logic of English. And during the times when we were using a separate math curriculum, our math. And we would keep those pretty short and as hands on as possible. And then, you know, we're done after that. Sometimes we would do some Spanish or some music as well, but that really varied. But the main thing was to do that block in the morning and then some reading or phonics and math practice.
That seems really reasonable. I mean, how many hours do you think you were spending when you're actually like, yeah, obviously you're getting ready in the morning, you're doing a wiggle time. How much
Right.
time were you actually devoting to, education that you would deem?
Yeah. So I figured out if you're including the movement time, which I did because it's time
Sure.
that she doesn't have free, I
Sure.
would say about 3 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was at a second grade level.
That was at a second grade level. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
3 hours,
that's really
sometimes
reasonable.
less.
Yeah. And did you think that was like maybe like at the top end of what she could handle? And maybe she's
Hmm.
like getting, yeah, I found like my oldest right now is in second. And I feel like on my busy days, tapping out at 3 hours is pretty much what she can handle right now.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
And it
there's
was,
art time in there too. It's
yeah,
not like
Yeah.
all instruction, but
yeah,
Right.
sit down time.
with homeschooling families, we're always doing things that are educational. We see everything as education. So it's hard
Right.
to quantify that. But if I'm sitting down and I'm doing, the ancient civilizations work and I'm doing
Hmm.
all about reading and then right start math and maybe some other thing, you're right. It's about 3 hours, maybe somewhere in
Yeah.
there. But it's not
Yeah.
was it an intense 3 hours for you? Do you feel like it was like really taxing or was it more of like a leisurely 3 hours?
I think it felt pretty leisurely once I
Okay.
got used to it. I
Yeah.
think that first year is going to feel taxing no matter what if someone's starting out because it's
Yeah.
new and you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think, by second grade, it felt like a very comfortable, leisurely 3 hours of like, okay, now we do this, now we do this. And also, our 3 hours would be divided up between like, maybe 1.5 hours in the morning and 1.5 hours in the afternoon,
Okay.
or probably more like 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
So it was
That's fair.
really like, she wasn't, I know a lot of homeschooling families like to get everything done in the morning so they can completely have the afternoons free. And that never worked for us because having that sustained focus for that long just felt really unfair to her particular brain. Like
Yeah, exactly.
she wasn't there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
How did you find so you had a struggle at the beginning with the preschool,
mhm,
and then you kind
mhm.
of came into it in the kindergarten. You got all the way up to second grade. How did you feel your relationship with your daughter evolved over that time? I felt like I've gotten a lot closer to my daughter and I understand her. We don't have as much, like, she talks to Ariel a little bit more about feelings and emotion stuff because,
Oh yeah.
that type of stuff. But it's, with respect to like, I can just look at her and I know what she needs, or
Hmm.
I can look at like just her face and go, "Oh, she's not feeling it today," or something like that. How did your relationship with your daughter evolve over that time?
Yeah, I think that it really deepened in a lot of ways. And I'm one of those parents who I don't play well.
Mhm.
Like I will play with my daughter, but I'm not good at it.
Hmm.
Um,
I hear
and
that. He's
doing,
the good one. I'm not.
Yeah.
I can't play
yeah,
well.
yeah, my partner is the one who can play better. And
Which
so
which sounds sad as an adult to not be able to play well,
But
but
it's
I kind of can't. I don't know.
it's hard. It's
it is.
hard.
Yeah.
And
It
so
is.
I really felt like doing the homeschooling with her gave me a way to connect with her
Mhm.
and a way to do these, okay, so we're not playing together every day, but we're going on these adventures, right? Like we're learning about ancient civilizations, we're going for
Mhm.
these long walks, we're looking at birds, we're, you
Mhm.
know, discovering these math concepts together and being excited about King Arthur and whatever. Like it was really cool, and it allowed me to share some of my interests with her. We did a really fun block in first grade about The Hobbit, and
That's awesome.
that was so great. That's actually the one that's in my Gumroad store right now. It's the
Mhm.
first one that I managed to
Yeah.
package for other people.
Yeah,
And
we'll put a
it,
link to it in the show notes.
yeah, and it was so much fun to do. It just really felt like, we were going on this magical nerd adventure together.
Yes.
And we did it when she was in first grade. And so she went from this really timid kid who really identified with Bilbo Baggins at the beginning to being like, oh, yeah, I can be an adventurer too.
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
Oh.
was, oh, so sweet, right? So you
Yeah.
get to do those things together. And like you said, yeah, I felt like because we were customizing and tailoring our curriculum all the time, I was always watching her and always trying to figure out what she needed. And you get better at it over time. You just do. And it felt
Mhm.
like we really got to know each other in a different way than we would have otherwise.
So can you tell me then, you went through this adventure and it sounds like your time with homeschool really grew
Mhm.
into this place where you were both really comfortable. And now you're transitioning to a new season and you're deciding that you're gonna send your daughter back to school. What was that kind of like for you?
Right? Why? What a bad idea. No, I'm
No,
joking.
no,
I
no
mean,
judgment,
kind
no
of,
judgment.
yes.
Yeah.
Um, so the main thing for us was the social piece.
Mm.
I feel like
Yeah.
it's really kind of taboo to talk about socialization in a lot of homeschooling spaces. Like if you say
Let's
like,
do it.
I'm worried about socialization with my child, all of the homeschoolers are like, socialization is fake.
Right. They
Um,
don't socialize in school. They're
right.
automatons that sit in
Yeah, they're not
desks,
allowed to socialize in school. And
Yeah.
yeah, but for us, it really just came down to I'm fairly introverted. My partner is fairly introverted. Our kid is an extrovert. What
Mhm.
do you do? And then the first year and a half, we were like totally isolated because of COVID. And by
Exactly.
Mhm.
the end of last year, we had her in 3 extracurriculars a week and a weekly meetup hike where we would meet up with other homeschoolers in our neighborhood that or in our area that were friends of hers. And she also has friends in our neighborhood that she plays with almost every day. And she was still telling me she was lonely.
Oh, okay.
It's hard as an only. I was an only,
It
and
is, yeah.
it's kind of a hard thing, and which is one of the reasons why I don't know that I play very well as now with my kids because I
Oh,
didn't
yeah, interesting.
play a lot with kids, right? You'd have friends come over, but you didn't have like a constant sibling, and it can be lonely as an only, even if you are in a
Yeah.
lot of activities. I
Yeah.
feel that.
And my partner was an only child, but was never lonely. But they were in school and after school programs and in a neighborhood where they had tons of kids over to their house constantly. So, one of the reasons that I got on board with having an only child was my partner was like, no, it was fine for me. And I was like, okay, seems fine. But then, COVID, what are you going to do? Like,
Yeah, yeah, that is
so,
such a
so
terrible
we
time.
had this super social, outgoing kid who was lonely. And at one point, she turned to me and she said, I just like to be with other kids.
Mhm.
And I like to be in a group of kids. That's when I feel best. And I said, okay, well, there's a place where they put the kids in a group. Maybe you should try going there. So yeah, we've actually at this point it's October and she's done about a month.
Mhm.
And it's a mixed bag. It's really about what I probably would have expected. She really loves the social part, and the days are too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about how the transition would be for her.
Yeah.
Hmm.
How she took our daughter is also incredibly social. Luckily, I'm an extrovert, as you can tell. So it works for me. I can get her out and I can do things, but she is a real social bug. I mean, that's a big part
Mhm.
for her, but I'm sure it
And,
would be hard
and
even
I'm
for
with
her to
you. I'm with you. I'm
transition.
kind of an introvert in my day to day. Around my
Right.
friends, once I get comfortable around people, I could be very extroverty and talky, blah blah blah.
Absolutely.
But like my natural thing is just to sit in the back because I'm the big ogre guy who sits in the back and I stand on the
Yeah.
wall and,
Yep.
and that's what I do. Right. And I totally understand that. And it is hard to like, get out and do things and meet people. And we have the barriers of like, well, these homeschool spaces tend to be primarily, women and whatnot. And
Hmm.
there's some friction there. I mean, walk up and go, "Hey, can I have your number so
It's so uncomfortable. Oh
we
my
can have a
God.
play date and everything?" And they're all looking at me going, "No."
Well, yeah, I think it's hard for the dads. I think it's really hard.
Yeah.
We have a little girl that our daughter wants to set up play dates with in preschool, and
Oh, it was a thing.
he goes,
You're going to preschool, and I have a friend, and you need to talk to her mommy, and you need to get her number
right.
so we can have a play
Well, and
date.
he was like,
I can't do that.
I do the drop off, he does the pickup, and he was like,
Right.
you need to do it
Yeah.
at drop off because if I do it at pickup, it might not go as well. And I really felt
Right.
like sad for him. Like, why should I have to be the one to? Not that I mind, but I just felt like you felt like the chances of getting this mom's number were exponentially higher if I asked than if you asked.
Well, I mean, there's
Yeah.
Then I
I
ended
just
up
don't.
finding out though she has a stay-at-home husband.
Yeah.
So
That's
it
true.
actually would have
Oh,
been fine. We didn't
perfect.
know, but it was funny that these so many homeschool spaces are, they don't say they're closed to dads, but they kind of are.
Well, and we have a further barrier of we don't live in an area with a lot of secular homeschool spaces.
Yeah.
And
it's
a
hard.
lot of homeschool spaces lean Christian and
Mhm.
lean pretty conservative.
Mhm.
And my partner and I are both visibly transgender people.
Mhm.
So am I going to get anybody's number? No.
That'd be more
Or
difficult.
if we're even going to get in through the door, right?
Yeah, right,
Like,
Yeah.
so,
it's so hard.
we last year she was doing a soccer program, which was not a homeschool specific program. It was just a soccer program. And I met a mom there who was a homeschooler and we chatted for a bit. And then, she mentioned her co-op and I was like, oh, what co-op is it? Because there aren't that many in our area.
Mhm.
And it was one that was like not just explicitly Christian, it was
Mhm.
explicitly Christian for like a specific Christian classical curriculum.
Okay.
And so it was just like a very polite way of like a little nod, like you would not be welcome there. I'm like,
Yeah, that's rough.
oh, okay, neat. Like I don't necessarily want to be in those spaces.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
not going to be comfortable for me either, but it does make it a bit more complicated. And I feel like if we had something like a completely secular parent partnership like you
Mhm.
guys have,
Yeah.
then, we may not have ended up trying all day, 5-day a week school because it is a lot. I would have
It is,
preferred
yeah.
something part-time,
Mhm.
but you have to go with the resources that you have in your area.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, and there's a lot of homeschool families out there who, aren't going to go the distance. They're doing it for a short period of time. There's some homeschool families that are like, I'm going to do it for elementary, but goodness gracious, I can't teach chemistry. So you'll go to public school in high school.
Right. Yeah.
So being able to transition back and forth and maybe, hey, we're moving to, my spouse is getting stationed in Germany and we have to go to
Mhm.
Germany. I got to homeschool for a couple of years. And then when we come back, you'll go back to the public school. So I
Right.
love the freeform
Yeah.
acceptance that, people are going to move in and out and situations are going to change. People may have to move for a job or whatnot, and being adaptable and welcoming homeschool families and then understanding that sometimes kids go back to
Right.
the school. And I think it's a normal thing. I don't look beyond it.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it's more normal than people realize that, like,
Yeah.
a lot of homeschoolers, maybe even the majority of homeschoolers, have sent kids to school at
Yeah.
some point for
Right.
some period of
Especially
time.
Well,
Especially since COVID, right?
and
I mean, how many millions of kids were homeschooled
Right.
for a couple of years and they just went back to public school?
And
A
I
lot.
know I've met
Yeah.
so many moms who have had like a difficult pregnancy and the kids go to school that year.
Right.
That's a great point.
Absolutely. And how many homeschoolers are, they go to school during the school year and they homeschool all summer. In my book,
Right.
you're a homeschooler. If you are doing stuff on the weekends with your kids, even though they go to school during the year, or you're doing extra stuff all summer or whatever, you're in the group, right? I don't feel
Mhm.
like we should be, we technically are public schoolers.
Yeah,
We aren't actually according to our state's law, we are not homeschoolers because we attend the parent partnership for performing arts.
Yeah, we actually in our homes, like the state of Washington's numbers, we are not in the homeschool bucket. We are actually public school.
So actually, the
Right.
homeschool numbers in our state actually look kind of low.
But because we have all these parent partnerships,
everybody's in these programs, right? And our daughter goes and takes a bunch of performing and practical arts, right? She's not taking math and science and reading and all that stuff. So
yeah, she's got choir in an hour,
right? Like she's doing all this fun stuff, but technically we're public schoolers. So there's some folks that are going to get really nitty gritty about like, well, you aren't technically a homeschooler because you didn't have to do a declaration of intent and all this stuff. And it's like, we can talk about all the semantics, but at the end of the day, we are parents who home educate either part-time or full-time.
Yeah.
And on our podcast, at least that's what counts in my book, because we got to all support each other, because not everybody is doing any form of home education. And if you're doing a little or a lot, welcome. Right.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed with having her in school is it's different for my schedule, but it's not that much different. Like it feels the same as homeschooling in a lot of ways, because it's like, I'm still watching my kid to see what she needs.
Yeah.
Right. I'm still watching her to see what she needs. When I got the questions from you, it was right before she went in, and I was like, there's no way we're going to be doing any kind of homeschooling stuff with this schedule. Like, there's no way she's going to have the attention span for it. She's just going to want to play when she gets home, and I'm going to have to let go of all of it. And now we're reading history quests on the weekends.
Oh yeah.
And I imagine you're going to do stuff during the summer because you want to.
Yeah. Or like, she stayed home the other day because she was just overwhelmed and stressed. And I'm like, I am team mental health days. You don't have to go. Screw it. They can deal with it. And so she stayed home. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Let's go for a walk, and then we'll read 2 chapters of Lord of the Rings and talk about your Halloween costume. And I would like you to do some writing during the day. And so she wrote this cute journal entry about her walk with Papa and how we found milkweed seeds. And
that's awesome.
I'm not supposed to say that it's cute because she's 8 now. She's very grown up.
But it's unbelievable.
Our 4-year-old doesn't want to be cute anymore. It's cool or beautiful or nothing.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Cute is off the table.
You're kind of now split between the two places. Maybe give us some idea of, like, we always like to ask this question. I like this question because it always gives me something cool, which is there something in your homeschool from before and even now, if you want to consider both times, what was something you couldn't live without?
I would say before, when we were homeschooling full time, I couldn't live without this very specific Waldorf thing. They're called main lesson books. So they're like these books with blank pages where the kids do all of their writing and drawing about a specific topic.
All right.
Okay.
So it would be like, we were doing a history block. She would have all of her drawings and paintings and anything except 3D stuff would be in this one place.
Cool. So they put all the work and effort into almost like a journal in some respects?
Yeah, it's like a journal. It's very much like a journal. There tend to be
this keepsake
shorter.
That's cool.
And then I put them all in a box, and when we're done with them, and then when we do review, like, it makes review so easy because you just pull it out, and then the kid is flipping through their own writing about these things. Even if they did it as copy work, it feels like theirs,
Yeah.
And so then they're flipping through it and they're like, oh, I remember when we did this part, or I forgot this part. And it's so fun. And that was awesome. Yeah, that was really cool. And that was probably my favorite thing. And if you'd asked me last year, I would say we couldn't live without that. Now we are living without those because we're not homeschooling every single day. So it's not consistent enough to feel like we have this one thing. Right now, I would say I probably couldn't do it without the nature trails in our neighborhood. Okay. We happen to live in this little pocket within a largely urban environment where there's a lot of nature and little urban farms. And we have these beautiful paths through little bits of woods and a park that's maintained by our local Audubon.
Oh, that's awesome.
And when we're doing a homeschooling day, that's usually the first thing we're doing is going for a walk and talking about what has changed since last time we walked through here. And that's, yeah, I probably couldn't live without that.
No, I really identified that we had a park that's about I don't know, 3/4 of a mile away that we always walk to.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the park had been torn down this year because it was unsafe and they had to
Oh,
rebuild it, but they took their sweet old time rebuilding it.
of course
And
they did.
last year I did a lot of like picnic learning lunches out there where I would
Yeah.
bring curriculum with me, would sit down, have a picnic, and we'd do some work and whatnot. They play and come back, we do a little bit more work. And I love that. I did it like 10 or 12 times this summer. It was absolutely fantastic. And
Yeah.
this year I didn't have it this year. And I felt like I want to go do the lunch picnic thing with them. And I felt really like I was losing something. So I really identify with the walks and having the nature right there in the
Yeah.
backyard is just
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
key.
And I think, especially, I'm sorry, just because we started homeschooling during COVID, that too
Yeah.
was like, actually, we started homeschooling during COVID without a car. So we couldn't leave our neighborhood
Oh
Wow.
man, that's
for
rough.
a
Wow.
year. And that was, yeah, having those green spaces close by saved
Just
us so
saves you.
many times.
I can believe
Wow.
it.
So I'm really curious with this transition back to school. We talked about how your daughter's adapting to that. Curious about you though. How one of the things for us is that when our daughter goes and stays with my parents or his parents, and she'll be like, oh, she'll be gone for a few days or whatever. We are with her so much, and especially you're like, you miss her intensely. How are you feeling with the transition to
Lies. I
school?
enjoy every minute of it.
No, I mean, like, how has that changed the rhythm of your day? And are you kind of dealing with some like a little bit of loss there of that time with her? How do you feel?
Yeah, the word that comes to mind is grief.
Mhm.
I just being really honest, I really love doing it, and now I'm not doing it all the time. And
Mhm.
it's really a hard transition for me. I think in some ways it's a harder transition for me than it is for her
Mhm.
because she's busy. She's busy and she's making new friends. And I have I can do work, I guess, but that's not satisfying in the same way.
Yeah.
And I like that the house is quieter because kids are loud.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But but yeah, I do really miss her. I do really miss her, and I am struggling, I think, still with that transition and how that's kind of shaking out. Actually, one of the things I've been doing is taking that time to actually take the curriculum pieces that I've made for her and for us over time and make them into things that I can sell so that other people can use them.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's been really rewarding. And I just finished putting together my secular Waldorf rhythm guide.
Okay.
And
Cool.
I'm like, I need to go through these steps for myself because
Mhm.
now that my life is so much different, I have to find how this is going to work for me during the day while she's gone. And then in the afternoon when she comes back and everything's, that's she comes home at 4 and she goes to bed at 8. So that's 4 hours of kind of go time, right? Because
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's
yeah.
everything has to
Yeah.
happen in those 4 hours.
Be
So
tough.
yeah, it's still very much in process figuring out what the new normal is going to be. But I think I am making progress on it
Okay.
slowly but surely.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Gumroad store that you have and the things you're offering there.
Yeah, so I have been working for the last probably 2 years on creating these completely secular Waldorf resources
Cool.
for myself and my own child. And, I originally wanted to have some of them up. I thought I was going to get the Hobbit block up a month after we completed doing it, and it took a
It
year and a
takes
half.
it takes so
No, no,
long.
no, no, no.
No.
Like
Yeah, we
like
know.
oh, I have to
It's a
type
long
this
time.
up and then I have to edit it, and once you type it up then you think about, wait, other people are going to want more options for this thing. It's intense. So what
Mhm.
I've been doing, which I love doing, is I'm taking a stance of using the things that work well for me and that I think are practical and usable about Waldorf education, and then pulling out all of the stuff that is religious influence, right? So, like using the fancy beeswax crayons that's not religious influence. They're just nice crayons. It's fine to have nice art supplies. And it's fine to have the religious stuff if you like it, again, but not everybody does.
Yep.
So pulling out, you can only do this at this age because they're not spiritually developed enough to learn real history until they've done blah, blah, blah. No, we don't do any of that. So I pull out all of that stuff, and then I create resources that enable parents who don't like taking things apart and putting them back together again. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but not everybody wants to build everything from scratch. It's very strange.
No,
They're not there yet.
they're not there.
All the other
Or
parents
maybe
are
they're
talking
maybe
about
they've
open
moved
and go
past it.
this and open and go that. And I'm like, well, where's the fun in that?
So, maybe they're just further in their journey. Maybe this is like a cyclic thing. You start out with the open and go, then
Yeah.
you like customize everything. Then you realize you were
You're like,
crazy
listen,
for
I've let
doing
it
it. And you
go.
go back to
Right.
just open and go.
Right. Yeah. So in the meantime,
They're more
while I'm
evolved.
still in there, I'm making resources that allow other people to have clear steps to how to go through. If you like the look of Waldorf or some of the feel of Waldorf, but you're uncomfortable with educating based on a guy in 1819's clairvoyant experiences. Me too. And here are how you can use the art-centered approach and the movement-centered approach without necessarily having to buy into the whole thing or without coming across religious content that is going to make you uncomfortable. Because, like, for example, one of the things about Waldorf education is they do Bible stories in 3rd grade. And if you listen to the stuff that's for the parent end, it says that it's just because those stories happen to meet children's developmental needs in 3rd grade. It's not for religious reasons. It's just that it meets their developmental needs. Well, if you read the books that are written for Waldorf teachers, it says that you teach them Bible stories in 3rd grade, or actually it's 2nd grade, I think. So that they will their inner voice of their conscious will become the voice of the Abrahamic God.
Gotcha.
Oh, well.
That sounds like religious influence to me. So we can teach history without that. We've been teaching history without that in the rest of the world for a very long time. Yeah, so really taking that apart and creating things for people who want to use some of it, but not all of it, and don't want to have to take it apart themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
Well, that's great work. I'm sure that I'm really interested to check out the Hobbit one when we're ready. Yeah, we love the Hobbit.
Yeah, we do.
So good.
So which movie did you show your daughter? Did you show her the cartoon from the old days?
Absolutely.
Of course.
Absolutely.
I was just
That's what we grew up with. So.
No, I was just talking to the neighbor about this morning. It's a little bit later here. I'm of the opinion that the live action Hobbit movies are an abomination.
Yeah.
They're too long.
Well,
we watched
the fan edit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen that. Better. Oh,
yes.
You gotta look for the fan edits.
Okay. All right.
As long as you own the Hobbit, you can get this fan edit.
It's a little choppy at some points because Jackson pumped in a lot of extra stuff.
But they take the entire 3 movies down to 4 hours total for everything together. And
because the thing is, it's like I felt like the live action movies were they were trying to make the Hobbit as epic and grandiose as the Lord of the Rings, and I'm like, well, it just isn't. It's a sweet little book. It's great, but it's a sweet little book.
Yeah, they took out a lot of things in the fan edits, and it was
most
really
of the 3rd
good.
movie was removed.
Right, all the White Orc stuff was
even
removed. Yeah, the Battle of the 5 Armies, that movie cropped down to 30 minutes, of the whole movie. It was all was left. So
fan edit, the people can seek out the fan.
Much better. And since we own the Hobbits,
Okay.
we were like, okay, cool, we'll go get the fan edits. So
Yeah. Okay.
it was much better.
Cool.
But
so
this has been so much fun. I gotta say.
Yeah.
We've
Thank you.
had a great morning
Thank
with
you so much for David for spending all the time with us.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. Thank you for talking with me.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time.
Happy homeschooling!